My name is Bronson. Hello, everyone. I'm the director of content at Awardco, and I'll be the moderator today for JD and Nick and kind of help facilitate the discussion and get everybody involved. Now, we would also like to invite you to continue to put questions into the Q&A chat during the webinar, and we'll try and answer them real time as it pertains to the discussion. And those that we don't get to, we will definitely hit on later at the end. But please pop into the Q&A right now. And let's get it going. Just tell us where you're viewing from, where you're located right now, and it'd be great to see where everybody is. But let's get started here on this webinar. And let me introduce our two speakers here today. JD Drazbek, who I unfortunately got it wrong. His title is the COO of WorkFit DX. And I'd love to hear you introduce that, JD, and kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go to you, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a healthcare executive for a number of years, a young one at that, and was recently asked by a few of my alma mater's business professors to run a startup whose mission is to empower others to discover career fit. And that's done through a diagnostic test based off of decades of research, as well as up-to-date AI with our partners at MIT. The director of MIT's AI program is one of our partners. So very passionate about helping people find fulfillment and joy in life and career through recognition. And it's an honor to be here today with you all.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, JD. And I'm really interested to kind of dive into the experience, what it was like as a younger executive in a healthcare organization, and what your organization is doing now to help people. That'd be really great. Thank you. And Nick Stensrud is one of our enterprise client success managers here at Awardco. Nick, you deal a lot with a lot of healthcare clients, and you see a lot of the challenges they face day to day. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself a little bit and going over your experience here at Awardco.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bronson. I'm Nick. I've worked in the tech space for about 7 to 8 years, and I've been with Awardco now for almost 4 years in client success. And I've been fortunate to work with several of our healthcare clients, and it's been a joy to consult with them as they've constructed their recognition strategy to address real business challenges like decreasing voluntary turnover, reducing burnout, increasing engagement. So excited to talk about some of those things today.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you both so much for being here, and thank you all on the chat here. We see a lot of people popping in and letting us know where you're viewing from. There's from all over the country. It looks like Florida, California, Missouri, South Carolina. That's wonderful. Thank you for participating there, and please continue to put your questions here as you hear them or as you kind of think of something. I'll be monitoring that, and I'll propose those questions to our subject matter experts here, Nick and JD. So let's get started here. A brief overview of our webinar. We're going to talk a little bit about the current state of the healthcare industry. What are some of the challenges that are being faced, especially post-pandemic, and what we're dealing with now that has kind of ended, and now there's a lot of different challenges. We're going to talk about the power of recognition and appreciation in healthcare, what that actually is, and how that can impact healthcare givers and patients. And then some best practices for recognition to kind of help people understand what you can do now in order to increase that engagement and satisfaction, both of employees and of people that might be participating, clients, patients, things like that. And then how to implement effective recognition programs. And I'm really excited, JD and Nick, that you're both here because your expertise is exactly what we need. So let's dive in here and talk about the current state of the healthcare workforce. And I'd like to propose a question to you both. What do you think are some of the most pertinent challenges faced by healthcare professionals today? And JD, I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the best things about healthcare that I loved was hiring and helping people find the right fits within the organization. And that's something that my company does as well currently. And with healthcare, I feel it's very unique out of any other industry because out of any industry, there's a very much an intrinsic value of why people go into healthcare, and it's largely because of their personal why. Healthcare is very, very service oriented. All that being said, I don't think that the healthcare industry is exclusive to what I think is an epidemic across the nation right now of the Great Resignation and the next phase of that being quiet quitting. So I personally had experience of, unfortunately, some employees other than others that would quiet quit, would not want to go above and beyond the call of duty. although fortunately, I would say in the companies that I work for, the majority of our employees did embrace the culture and embrace the mission and would go above and beyond. So to answer your question of the current state of healthcare workers, I think burnout is very real. I think we're not exclusive, or we are part of quiet quitting. And I think overall, people not feeling valued and recognized is an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe, like you said, I like how you said that people in healthcare often go there because of their personal why. And that can be very fulfilling, but also very challenging when maybe it wasn't what you expected right off the bat. And maybe you have to question your personal why because of, that burnout. A lot of things are very hard in healthcare. You're seeing pain and a lot of difficulty every day, and that can be hard on a person for sure. So thank you for sharing that. Nick, in your experience with healthcare clients, what are some of the challenges that you've seen a lot of healthcare clients facing today in terms of engagement or burnout, or what's one of the largest ones you've seen?
Yeah, I'll share. My wife is currently in PA school, and she recently finished her didactic year and is now doing rotations. And the first rotation that she had was in the ER, doing 12-hour shifts from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and doing that about 4 times a week. So, and she noted that during those 12 hours that patients, whether it's 3 a.m., 9 p.m., are coming in nonstop, right? So there's not really any time for lunch breaks or for snacks or for anything really, right? So she loved her experience, but had to admit that at the end of the rotation, right, she was exhausted, and that was only 6 weeks. A lot of these of our healthcare professionals, not just in the ER, but are doing this year-round, year over year, right? So it's easy to see why burnout is prevalent among our healthcare employees.
Yes.
And similar in many of my conversations with HR professionals in healthcare, burnout is one of, if not the biggest challenges they're facing. It affects a number of things on staffing, like absenteeism, reduced productivity, and voluntary turnover. And I'll just kind of share a couple of quick stats from a recent study on the National Library of Medicine's website. States that 67% of healthcare professionals plan to leave their current position, 56% are used up, and 51% say they're emotionally drained. So I think it's fair to say that burnout, then leading to voluntary turnover, are some of the most prevalent issues.
That's incredible. Could you say those stats one more time? Because I think that's really incredible.
Yeah, so we have 67% of healthcare professionals plan to leave their current position. 56% would define themselves as used up, and 51% say they're emotionally drained. That's
incredible. Over half, like well over half. That amazing. JD, have you seen that in your experience as well? Do you see that a lot of was it that prevalent in your experience?
At our hospital, both in Utah as well as in South Carolina, it wasn't. But we were fortunate. We definitely experienced some of that, not to that extreme. But speaking with some of my colleagues across the nation, I would say those statistics are accurate from speaking with others. Something came to my mind that I believe it was Studer said. I know everybody on this attendees list is probably familiar with Studer and his principles, but it's the principle that you're always recruiting, even your current employees, because they're getting emails left and right of, hey, come here, sign on bonus here. So having the mentality, every conversation you have when you're rounding, that you're retaining and you're constantly recruiting your team members, is, especially the frontline team, is very, very accurate. And I did see that very prevalent.
Always recruiting. I like that. I think that's probably applicable across every organization, not
Absolutely.
just healthcare, but definitely healthcare. So thank you both so much. And we're going to hit on a few stats here to kind of build on what you mentioned there, Nick. This is from the American Medical Association, that 49% of physicians are experiencing burnout. That kind of correlates with what you mentioned there as well, Nick. And that 35 to 54%, that's a huge spread, but nurses and physicians are experiencing significant burnout. I think the point here is that healthcare is a very difficult job, and burnout is just incredibly prevalent, perhaps more so than in other industries. And in the Q&A chat for all of you viewers here, please let us know what some of your challenges are. What if you had to pick one is the most significant challenge you're facing? And we'll see if we can address that and talk about that, because if you're experiencing it, it's very likely that other people are as well. So not only are people and our physicians and healthcare givers and providers experiencing these challenges, but what is the impact on patient care and organizational performance? JD, I wonder if you could address this a little bit. How do you think these challenges are impacting patient care and even organizational performance?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give a shout out to a mentor, Britt Barrett. He wrote a book, Patient Comes Second. I believe that's the title. But the principle being, you got to take care of your team first and foremost. I was an executive at HCA Healthcare, and that was one of our goals during the pandemic, was take care of the people first. I think it's critically important. You, one, take care of yourself. You then take care of your team, your direct reports. So for example, me as an administrator, my directors, because if you take care of yourself, your directors will be okay. And if your directors see you taking care of yourself and you take care of them, they'll take care of their managers, and then the trickle effect. So I think if we don't address the needs of the team, patient care will suffer. I think that's very evident from my experiences. Even in my own personal life, if I'm, having a grumpy day, that grumpiness is going to spread. Or if I'm not getting enough sleep, or if I don't feel valued, my patient's probably not going to feel valued. So I think it's critically important that we address the needs of our team first through some of the things we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, definitely. Like, you can't care for others until you care for yourself. I think
absolutely.
That's said in many different ways. But what was the name of that? Was it a book that the patient?
It was a book. Yeah, Britt Barrett, Patient Comes Second, I believe is the name of it.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting idea, and I think that most people would agree with that. Once you sit down and you talk about it. But as a healthcare giver, maybe someone going into that field, it's like, no, the patient is always first.
Yeah.
And while that's true, yes, you always want to give the best care. It can be very difficult if you're not caring for yourself or for your teammates or your teams as well. So thank you for that. Nick, I wonder if you might address that as well, especially like some of the things that we're seeing here in the chat. Some people are saying, like Alexandra Schaefer, saying mass layoffs are a problem for her and that company morale is low. And that can definitely translate to patient care as well, and experiencing that burnout, because if people are getting laid off, then the workload falls on others, and then that morale kind of gets low. What are some ways that you've seen your clients use to address something like that?
Yeah, well, burnout can kind of create a bit of a nasty cycle, right? So if your employees are burnt out, there's more likelihood that there will be voluntary turnover. And with that causes remaining staff to have to take on even more responsibility, resulting in even more burnout, right? So it kind of gets into that cycle that leads to lower morale, higher stress levels. And if you add on, of course, mass layoffs, that only adds into the mix, right? So
yeah.
In turn, if we're low on staff, the number of patients are only increasing. That can create a bit of an unsafe ratio, unsafe patient to staff ratio, right? Mm-hmm. Which in turn, of course, has significant impacts on patient outcomes and lower patient satisfaction.
Yeah, definitely. There's another question here from Nicole Walkers, who says, we are an academic medical school, and our biggest challenge is it's difficult for staff to step away from work for any in-person engagement or recognition activities or gifts or lunches, etc. How would either of you address that? Because, healthcare is a very difficult profession, and I know we've hit on that, but it's even difficult to step away and find the time to care for yourself or your team. How can you carve out that time? JD, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the hard answer is that you've got to make it a priority. We all have the same amount of hours in a day. And I know this is easier said than done. I can feel kind of some of the cringe, but the hard answer is that you do need to make a priority for it. And it's a great paradox, because sometimes the less time you spend, say, on what might seem to be the need right there, the more time and the more energy you actually have. So kind of the paradoxical part of that. I also think it's important to speak up. We need to control what we can control, and what we can't control, we need to voice our opinions. So for example, if we need to have higher staffing ratios or better pay, instead of saying, oh, corporate's not going to let us do that, or, oh, this or that. No, present a business case, argue the case, and go forward. And then if it doesn't work after that, then you tried your very, very best. So I think it's very important, one, to tell your truth, and then second, control what you can control, and then third, prioritize the paradox of making time for those things. And as a result, I've seen that you'll actually have more time in the end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that correlates in so many different ways. Like if you're making priority for the things that may matter the most, you will find that energy later. That's a great point. Thank you for sharing that. So we want to continue forward here and talk about employee recognition. So the impact of employee recognition can't be overstated. And Awardco is an employee recognition company. We help organizations easily do that. But we want to talk about the impact of employee recognition, because recognizing employees, everybody knows that, yeah, I want to do that. It's important. It's useful. Finding the time can be very difficult. Finding the right words or finding, just the support you need in order to do that. But let's talk a little bit about employee recognition and the power of it. What do you think, Nick, are some of the benefits specific to healthcare that an employee recognition program of some kind or initiative or something like that might have?
Yeah. I'll just kind of start, right? Employee recognition is when an employer is intentional about acknowledging and rewarding their employees. And that can take many different forms: promotions, bonuses, raises, awards, but it can also be more informal, right? Like day-to-day peer-to-peer recognition, allowing for your team members to praise one another. And that's pretty cost effective and easy to start. And it's crucial because it fosters a positive work culture where employees can feel valued and motivated. It can help employees feel secure in their value to the company, right? And if they're secure in their value to the company, that inspires them to continue doing great work. Contributes to job satisfaction, and satisfied employees are more likely to stay with their workplace. I'll also just add, recognition is a great way for companies to drive organizational values, right? It's easy to link recognition to a company's purpose, mission, and values. So if you can get your employees behind what values you're trying to drive, of course, we can expect more productivity and better outcomes.
Yeah. And there's so many different ways to recognize, right? Like you can either do it officially through some sort of platform like Awardco, or you could do it through even as simple as a suggestion, an anonymous box, where you put in a little note or something. And JD, I wonder if you might also speak to some of the benefits of recognition in the healthcare industry. And recognition can take many forms. So however you've seen that,
Yeah, thank you so much for that. To loop back the previous question of, we really just don't have time. And that's kind of what I understood it to be. It takes milliseconds to smile, to wave, and to say hello. And I want to illustrate that with a story. I remember I was rounding on our medical surgical floor once, and the team members gave a compliment to one of my colleagues, myself. They said, "Hey, every time you pass by, you stop, you say, hey, hello, how's the day going, this and that." And being sincere, if something really was wrong, we would address it of like, hey, the day stinks. Oh, what's going on? What can we do to help? What can I do? But sometimes, more often than not, it was just, hey, how's it going? And they said that was so impactful for them because they felt seen. And as human beings, I feel it is innate in us to want to be seen. You think of children. Hey, mom, look at me. I did this. Look at that. Look at this. It's within us. We want to be seen. We want to be recognized. And just waving and saying, hello, hey, how's it going? And then taking the time to address issues if needed doesn't cost a dollar. And oftentimes doesn't take as much time as we might think it may. Did that answer your question?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That answered mine. Nick, do you have anything that came to mind as we were speaking there? If not, totally okay, but I'm just wondering if...
Yeah, no, I think JD's absolutely right. We don't need to complicate what recognition is, right? It can be as simple as you mentioned, Bronson. Maybe it's a thank you note, or maybe it's allowing for a system for your patients to. I have a couple of clients in the healthcare space who allow for their patients to essentially write notes of gratitude to their caregivers, right? And you can imagine the special feeling that might provide for your physicians or for your nurses, right? So I think being creative and understanding what your employees value, and then maybe tying recognition to those values.
Yeah, that's so true. That reminds me of a story that we're going to talk about a little bit later and get into more depth. But I read a book called The Happiness Advantage, and it's talking about all of the advantages and the actual science behind what happiness can do for you. And they did a study where they put doctors in a positive mood before they made a diagnosis. And the way they did that was they just gave them a lollipop, like one of those old crusty suckers that you used to get at banks and stuff like that. They would just give the doctor or the caregiver a lollipop and say, hey, you're doing great. And then the caregiver would go into and diagnose a patient, and diagnoses were better and faster, like measurably better and faster, simply because they were in a better mood. So there's so many simple ways, like a sucker, to help someone feel better, or to help someone feel a little more positive, feel seen, like you said, JD. And that can have a measurable impact on so many different things with healthcare. So let's talk about that impact. We talked about what employee recognition is, but some of the impact is, this is from Gallup, that 31% recognition provides 31% lower voluntary turnover in organizations. So if you recognize a little bit more, you can have a lower turnover. It's incredible. It's simple. It's just simple but impactful. And recognition can have a 44% increase in employee engagement. That engagement can lead to a host of different benefits, lots of different things: better diagnoses, better culture, better values, better, lower turnover, all sorts of things like that. But there's also specific ones to healthcare, like I mentioned earlier, and we want to get into those. We've been talking a lot about burnout and stress. JD and Nick, you both have brought that up. How do you think that recognition can reduce that burnout? Because that happens over time and is a buildup of things. How can recognition alleviate that? JD, will go first. Or Nick, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. I think that's exactly right. Employees who report giving recognition a few times per month are more than nearly 2 times as likely to say they experienced gratitude before. And it's been often said that gratitude is an antidote to burnout. And I think that's true, right? I think if we can get our employees to feel gratitude for their employer, for their job, that can mitigate a lot of the compassion fatigue that maybe they feel, or other types of fatigue. Other stats along with that is employees are about 40% less likely to report having experienced a lot of stress if they're giving frequent recognition, less worry and less sadness. Employees are 7 times as likely to strongly agree that they have meaningful connections or a best friend at work, and as much as 10 times as likely to strongly agree that they belong. And of course, with that, right, that all leads to some of the productivity increases that we've discussed, and enhanced patient care from higher engagement, increased resilience, and better teamwork across departments.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing you mentioned there, Nick, is really interesting, and I wonder if any of our viewers here have experienced this in not either personally or in their organizations. But I'd like to talk a little bit more about that and highlight it. You mentioned something called compassion fatigue. Could you define that a little bit? And then I'd like to toss it over to you, JD, to kind of talk a little bit more about that. Yeah,
JD mentioned earlier, right, that our healthcare professionals are keenly interested in people and in their well-being. It's why they go into the profession in the first place. Healthcare is highly meaningful, and they care, right? They care a lot, and you can imagine that caring about a lot of different scenarios every day and meeting with your patients, as loving and as caring as they are, that can be tiring, right? To have to do that a lot. So that's why it's called compassion fatigue, right? Because you're feeling compassion for so many different people, that can have an effect on mental well-being.
Yeah. JD, I wonder if you might add to that anything from your experience as well.
Yeah, no, Nick hit it right on the head of the nail. Compassion fatigue is very much a real thing, and I do believe that proper recognition is the antidote. And I say proper recognition because I believe in the platinum rule. The golden rule is do others as you'd have, do others as you'd have do unto you, like to do unto you. But the platinum rule is do what unto others as they would like it done unto them. So sometimes recognition might be the private note to the person who doesn't like public recognition, because sometimes public recognition can actually be counterproductive and it makes them cringe. For other people, it's not a private note. They want the public recognition at your daily safety huddle or when you're rounding on the floor or a cake or something like that. So I think knowing how the team member feels valued and recognized is extremely important in really achieving the end result of helping them feel seen and heard and needed. So again, I think, at least for me personally, because I've experienced different forms of burnout, not to the level that our physicians and frontline staff have experienced, but it's often because I don't feel valued. I don't feel needed. I don't feel seen. And for me personally, it's amazing, just a little bit of recognition of what it can do, and it just fills my spirits. I often tell people or my boss that you could feed me on compliments and food. And for some people, that's very, very true. For others, again, it's not. They don't like to have that public recognition. But I would say for many, it is. And it is one of the great antidotes of that very, very real burnout.
Yeah, I love that. The platinum rule. I've never heard that before. That's really interesting. Do unto others.
I think it's another Studer.
As they would have. How could you rephrase that or talk about that?
do unto others as they would have you do, not as you would have do unto yourself. Do unto yourself as you like, treat others as you'd like to be treated, but treat others treat others. So the golden rule is treat others as you'd like to be treated. The platinum rule is treat others as they would want to be treated.
Love that. Yeah. And you have to know how they want to be treated. So you got to ask them, right?
Absolutely. You got to get to know them. You got to get to know the person behind the badge.
Yes. Love that. That's wonderful. Thank you both so much for sharing that. That's really impactful. So we've talked a lot about this. We're going to kind of highlight some of the things we've talked about here. Employee recognition can reduce burnout and stress. So employee recognition can reduce stress by up to 15%. Now that can vary depending on frequency. It can vary depending on who it comes from or, things like that, but it can reduce that stress. Employee recognition has an improvement in patient care. Hospitals with robust recognition programs see a 12% improvement in patient satisfaction. And I would love to ask both of you what you think might be an example of a robust or good recognition program in a hospital. Maybe some of our viewers here are looking and be like, how can I do that? What can I do? Maybe we can give an example of either a client, Nick, that you've worked with, or an experience you've had, JD, in your background of a recognition program in a healthcare, in a hospital. Nick, if we could start with you, what examples do you have there?
Yeah, I would love to share. I work with one of our healthcare clients, Franciscan Missionaries of Our Lady Health System. I think I got that right. They were interested in increasing both productivity and teamwork at their workplace, right? So they developed a recognition program where if you hit certain criteria, you would be given stamps. And if you got 5 stamps, then you could trade that in for a monetary QR code, which could then be claimed and redeemed on any award that they want, right? So some of those criteria was, all right, if you discharge patients within an agreed upon time frame, if you transition patients from a higher level of care to a lower level of care, or you transition patients from an ER to a bed, or maybe you're going above and beyond and you're pulled into another unit to help start an IV, or pulled into another unit to help another patient, or you're transporting a patient because all the transporters are busy. Those would all come together and you get stamps for those and you'd be able to redeem those for that QR code, right? What's interesting is they saw vast improvements in employee engagement and hitting these criteria. just by adding a monetary recognition component to it. So, like I said, you can get creative as possible here with your recognition programs, and as long as they're kind of pointing to a certain value or have some type of benefit for the employee, I think we'll see vast improvements.
Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. JD, what is an example that you've seen of a hospital or a care facility with a robust recognition program?
Yeah, so we rolled one out across our Utah hospitals as well as Idaho and Alaska. And I believe it was actually nationally, I believe. And at our hospital in Draper, it was really cool for me to see the cultural change of people talking about recognition and about the point systems and things like that. And you could feel that people felt more seen. At least I could. I think recognition is so important, and it starts from the top, from the CEO, and then trickles down. So having executive buy-in is really important. So as HR professionals, I think it's very important to advocate for this, and it's important to advocate for a systemic recognition program. That being said, I think there's great power in peer-to-peer recognition as well. And I remember one day I was down on the floor and I just walked into the plant ops shop and the guys were talking about recognitions they got from, I think it was an EBS employee, and just to see the excitement and kind of the fun behind it as it rolled out, as well as the results of a happier workforce, which then resulting in higher patient satisfaction, I'm confident of, was really cool to see and experience.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing that. There's a question here that popped up that I think is addressed to JD, what you said about getting leadership buy-in, because it does come from the top.
Yeah.
It's from Charlie Addix. He says, when offering those types of rewards, how would you recommend taking that to finance or budgeting for approval, since the amounts paid out will change a lot from month to month and some people will save up, etc. So in essence, how can you get better leadership buy-in for something like this?
Yeah, what's the business case behind it?
Yeah.
That's a great question, and it's a hard battle. That's a very good question. It's one that I struggled with as well for a long period of time, and I think, again, control what you can control. I think creating the business case. I once had a leader, a mentor, friend of the ACHE Congress, talk about how when you want to get something done, create a business case behind it, the dollar amount, and that kind of made me cringe a little bit. It's like, well, let's just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. But more often than not, there is a dollar amount behind the right thing to do. So many of us are familiar with preventative care, population health. Let's help people before they're in the critical acute care, decades before that. I think recognition very much does that for when everything's on fire, budgets are low, and there's turnover is costly, so expensive. And if you can prove and you can show through some of the research that we've shown here that, hey, just 1 or 2% a reduction of turnover is going to save us X amount of dollars if we implement a quarter of that in a recognition program or an eighth of that in a recognition program, I personally believe that you have a very strong case financially to show the legitimacy behind a recognition program.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said there, that often the right thing to do does have a tangible impact on the bottom line.
Sometimes it doesn't, but oftentimes it does.
Yeah. Sometimes it won't. That's true. I think we probably need to acknowledge that, but
yeah.
Sometimes it really does. And hopefully some of these stats we're providing can help you with that. So let's continue here and kind of provide more of that for any of you that are looking to make this business case. So employee recognition equals better diagnoses. Like we talked about, doctors put in a positive mood before making a diagnosis, make accurate diagnoses 19% faster. That's pretty great. I think that's a really impressive stat to use. If you're looking for a business case. And a positive mood, it doesn't take much. Like, you don't have to be extravagant in order to put someone in a positive mood. It can be a smile. It can be a how are you? It can be a lollipop, whatever it is. And that's from this book called The Happiness Advantage, which you can look up that later. It's a great book. Employee recognition provides enhanced team collaboration. So companies with strong recognition practices are 2.5 times more likely to see better collaboration. And I think in the healthcare industry, better collaboration, as with many industries, but perhaps specifically with healthcare where lives may be on the line, collaboration is just, you can't overstate how important that is and how much you need that and how getting teams to be unified is important. And employee recognition equals higher retention rates. Like you were saying there, Nick, the average turnover rate for bedside nurses is 18.7%. That's pretty big. And if you can reduce that turnover, like that stat earlier we said from Gallup, that if you have a recognition program that can reduce turnover by as much as 31%, like turnover is costly, as you mentioned, JD, and if you can reduce that, like incredible, that's wonderful. And recognition, like we said, is proven to impact turnover rates by as much as 31%. So as much productivity, et cetera. I'm kind of burning through this a little bit. All these stats and these slides will be available to you after this webinar. So please feel free to review these as well. But we're trying to get to what you can do, like the best practices, the strategies, what you can do in order to implement this. So high employee engagement leads to 41% lower absenteeism, higher productivity, et cetera. So now we want to talk about like implementing effective recognition programs. And I'd like to ask both of you, and we'll start with Nick, what is the difference between an effective recognition program and one that perhaps isn't as effective?
Yeah, good question. I think this is where it's important that the employer or the company has well-defined goals on what they're trying to achieve, right? And then aligning your recognition programs with those goals. If we don't have those goals in place, the recognition programs may be a little aimless. So that's one part of it is make sure we define our goals and our values that we're trying to hit. And two, it's really important that recognition be frequent, right? That employees are kind of constantly being validated and recognized. So I think an effective recognition program would be providing more opportunities for employees to be recognized. And that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit here, right? There's you can recognize people on a yearly basis for their service anniversary, for their birthday. Other ideas you may consider, of course, is a peer-to-peer recognition that we discussed, manager-to-peer recognition. But also, we want to make sure that we're awarding and recognizing our top performers. So if we can implement some type of nomination program where maybe that's employee of the quarter, employee of the month, and that those employees then receive a monetary award or some type of award to highlight those MVPs, we'll say, that encourages everybody else, right? You see one MVP get highlighted, of course, you think, oh, I want that, and that encourages better participation. So frequent recognition, I would say, that are aligned with goals, and then on top of that, to personalize your recognition.
Yeah.
To ensure that recognition specific, that's timely. So if you can encourage the recognition to point out something that specifically the employee I did, that just makes it all the more meaningful.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. It's excellent to hear that expertise. Well, something you said kind of makes me think of a question, and I'd like to, JD, speak to your experience here. What are some goals that recognition, or what are some goals that people can set that recognition can help achieve? Because, knowing what your goals are, like you said, Nick, what are some goals that healthcare organizations can set that recognition can help them achieve? Might be a bad question.
No. I want to make sure I understand the question correctly. Mm-hmm. By goals, do you mean like reduction of turnover, or how many recognitions you do in a quarter or in a month, or both?
Yeah, that's a good question. Nick, what have you seen in your experience?
Yeah, I think both are great, right? I think it's most important that we have those high-level company goals, whether it's decreasing voluntary turnover, increasing employee satisfaction. And then there's the more smaller goals that help lead to those bigger goals, whether it's number of times you recognize somebody or somebody's recognized, or number of times managers are interacting with their employees, right? Those are important too. So I think they all kind of make the framework.
And I would say that those goals are absolutely critical. life without goals is like golf without holes, in my opinion. So from my experience, when we had HR professionals and even the CEO pushing out, or the manager, depending on what tier you're working with, encouraging people to, hey, don't forget it's the end of the quarter. Make sure you're doing recognitions. And then again, I can't stop on the simplicity, but the power of leading by example as leaders, as in the hospital. If you are recognizing, your team is, I don't know statistically, but is so much more likely to also recognize. If you're not utilizing the program, if you're not recognizing, they're more than likely not going to. Some might, but more than likely they're not going to. So really, your attitude is so critical about the program. And I want to tell a story, a personal story. When we had the recognition program rolled out, I was a little bit, opposed to it. Not strongly opposed, but I didn't have buy-in. And it wasn't until we as a team, we decided to move forward and do it. And I believe as a leader, you need to speak your truth, speak your mind. And then once a decision is made, you're on board. You're like, okay, I don't agree with this, but let's go ahead and let's do it. And it wasn't until I saw the frontline experiences and the recognition I felt from others giving to me that I bought in. So I think it's really important to give it a shot. And then once you give it a shot, go all in and let your attitude reflect, and it will yield great results.
That's an incredible story. If I may ask, what were some of the reasons that you weren't bought in initially?
Yeah, so one of the biggest reasons for me was I felt that you should do the right thing in the right thing of itself. Like a means, it shouldn't be a means to an end. It should be an end in itself. Yeah. You should, help the patient out not because you think you're going to get recognized, but you should do it because of the thing because it's the right thing to do. Yeah. Plain and simple. What I found was sometimes people would do things because they thought that they were going to get points or recognized. But I would say more often than not, or often, people would still do the right things. It's the right thing to do. And then being recognized is just the cherry on top. Mm. And it would, again, help them feel seen, feel needed, and inspire them to come back the next day.
Yeah, that's really great. Just reinforce their already intrinsic motivation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you both so much for sharing that. There's a question from Monica. Can you provide some examples of healthcare recognition ideas that are low cost? We are a nonprofit healthcare organization with a very tight budget. And yes, Monica, we're going to address those right now, kind of go over some ideas that are low cost and hopefully provide some examples for you here. So thank you for that question. We want to talk about some strategies for effective recognition here. And one is regular and consistent acknowledgement. So we've already discussed the importance of recognition and how important that is to do it regularly. But how can we provide, are there some examples, either JD or Nick, that you can provide of daily, monthly, and annual recognition practices in the healthcare industry? Perhaps some that are even low cost. Nick, we'll go for you first here.
Yeah, I kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think the real bread and butter here in a cost-effective way is to rely on a peer-to-peer recognition program that can be non-monetary, right? It doesn't necessarily need to have a non-monetary component. So if you can implement a non-monetary peer-to-peer recognition, that's basically no cost, and it's your cultural driver. Other recognition programs that award monetary points and awards, that's great. But getting praise from your team members and those you work with the most is often the most meaningful. So that's what I would say, that's a great option, right? Lean towards a peer-to-peer recognition program. But then also you can consider a nomination type program where people nominate each other, whether it's Employee of the Month, as we mentioned, or whatever it is, or an MVP award. And then after all those nominations are submitted, whether it's most meaningful nominations that you choose the winner from, or it's whoever receives the most, you then give them an award. And that way you're only really awarding one person that's getting any kind of gift or monetary amount, but it's still driving culture because people are participating in it. So I think those are two really great, relatively low cost ways to recognize.
Yeah, so like peer-to-peer programs where they can nominate each other, and then some nomination programs that you mentioned. Those are the two.
Peer-to-peer recognition. Maybe it's not necessarily nominating, but it's like a thank you note, right? It's like, oh, thank you for your help in the ID unit today, or just any type of gratification that you want to share. You give them that opportunity, but also a nomination-focused program that is trying to inculcate some type of value or goal.
Yeah. That's really great. JD, I wonder if you have anything to add to that, or specifically like anything you want to add. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's many different organic, low cost or no cost recognition tools that you can give. In my experience, I'm going to share 3. First one I already shared is just literally acknowledging people, saying hello, hey, how's it going? Remembering little details about them. They just went on a fishing trip, or their niece's birthday. So I'd say that's the first one. Very, very simple. Doesn't cost you anything. Low time. Takes effort, and remembering their name. I mean, that is so powerful if you can. Really, really powerful. The name is one of the most beautiful sounds to people's ears, is their own name and getting it right. The second, I would say, catch people doing good. When you're rounding in the hospital, if you're not rounding in the hospital, even as HR professionals, get out and round. There's tons of studies behind decrease in upset employees and strikes and things like that of administration and teams actually get out and round and see the different floors, or do a walk in your shoes. And when you are rounding, and when you see good things going on, call it out right then and there. Catch them doing good and say, hey, I really appreciate how you just picked up that piece of trash, or hey, I really appreciate how you got the call light for that a team member that seemed busy, or you yourself doing those things as well if you can, and when clinically or non-clinically appropriate. And then the third, I would say, is having a mission moment or a recognition moment in each of your meetings, and again, setting that example. It doesn't even have to be a big executive or all managers meeting. It could be a simple meeting of the 60-day lunch, or any sort of meeting. So those 3 things I say: saying hello, catch them doing good, and mission moments or recognition moments in meetings.
That's really awesome. At Awardco, we do that. We start every meeting with what we call recognize the good, and we will highlight a recognition, that from anybody. And it has so many cool benefits, but oftentimes, because Awardco has grown a little bit since I've been here, I don't know everybody, but I will see people that do something awesome, and I'll read about them because of these recognize the good moments. And then I will know who they are in walking around the office and be like, oh, hey, like, congrats on that thing. It's really great. And it just kind of ripples out. It's really amazing. Thank you both for sharing that. Appreciate that. So we've talked about regular and consistent acknowledgement, which a lot of that can be free. It can be very low cost, peer-to-peer nomination, remembering people's names, being consistent with that. And you can also personalize recognition. I think we touched on this a little bit, JD, where you said remembering their name or remembering what they've been up to, which can be very difficult. If your brain is full of a whole bunch of other stuff, you may not remember the person's name. So there's tips and strategies you can do to help that out. Like you can make associations, or just try, and even it can be maybe a little embarrassing at first, but be like, I'm sorry, remind me of your name. And then like, oh yeah, like we talked about this one thing, and that can be really, really beneficial. You can also encourage peer-to-peer recognition, like you mentioned, Nick. That can be incredibly beneficial simply because you're working with these people regularly, daily, and they may see things that perhaps management or people otherwise may not see, and can recognize those little moments. And then you can also leverage technology, which we haven't talked a whole lot about, but I wonder if Nick and JD, if there's anything you might say about leveraging certain technologies. Awardco certainly does this, but there are other ways to do it, to leverage some technology. I wonder if either of you have anything to say about that. JD, we'll start with you. What did you use a technology in your previous experience when you?
We did. And I know, I'm sure, and Nick and Bronson probably can speak to this better than I can, but the different technologies that Awardco has to offer, I'm sure, are great, like a dashboard where the whole hospital, the whole company can see that recognition. I think that is powerful. And then, again, in an organic way is texting or sending a video if you're out on a trip, or for employees that are remote. Utilize technology, and it's a gift. So use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say if if you're trying to, as an HR professional, trying to manage recognition programs without some type of technology, that would require a lot of administrative oversight, and it would take a lot of time to effectively run. So if you can find or leverage some technology to automate a lot of that for you, a lot of these things can be automated, like birthday recognitions, service year recognitions can all. You can find a technology that can take care of all that for you, so that you're not having to buy hundreds of gift cards and then mail them out or whatever you're currently doing. And to JD's point, they'll often have a lot of analytical insight to be able to show what trends are working, how are your employees reacting to certain initiatives that you're running. So more powerful reporting and analytical insight there.
Yeah, thank you both for that. Thanks for sharing that. There's a question from Mac in the Q&A. What are some effective approaches for making it simple and easy for patients to provide recognition to staff? Nick, we'll start with you and then we'll go to JD. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I've worked with several HR professionals that are doing something similar or trying to implement something similar. One is I've seen healthcare clients just allow for thank you notes to be written, and then that's uploaded to a system. So that's been really effective, but you can imagine that probably takes some time to kind of manually input. I know Awardco is actually addressing this problem right now, where we'll be able to allow for patients to go to a website, type in a recognition there, and be able to recognize your employees on the Awardco platform. So more to come from the Awardco side, but yeah, allowing for your patients to recognize those in a simple way, whether it's a thank you note, we've seen be impactful.
Yeah. JD, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, no, a system like that would be phenomenal, especially sometimes when it's hard to read people's handwriting, mine being the worst of all. But yeah, technology is powerful, and I would say also to the time aspect, if you can have other people other than your team members, which are busy, but a patient that might be in bed and actually can write, then giving recognition, that's a very, very low time cost, and could be an effective alternative.
Yeah.
Source.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you both for sharing that. And if you're interested in what Nick mentioned about the external recognitions, that feature is going live in just a couple weeks. So you'll be able to learn more about that if you're interested. So Nick, you also touched on this, and JD, you've touched on this as well throughout the whole of this webinar, that aligning recognition with organizational values can be very impactful, and it can help continue to drive those values and ensure that alignment between the leadership and what's happening in the organization. It can be incredibly beneficial. So best practices, as we've talked about throughout the webinar, we'll just highlight a couple of these. Have a strategy, like Nick, you said earlier, focus on those goals, utilize technology to save you time, survey employees. JD, you talked about this, maybe not necessarily surveying, but asking employees to discover what they want, how they want to be recognized. Determine frequency and visibility, like how often will you recognize, who will it be visible to? Do you only want it visible to a certain group or floor or something like that? And then reporting can help you with that business case as you report back on what your initiatives, what kind of results they had. So we want to make sure we leave some time for Q&A for our audience to ask questions to JD and to Nick, and about your experience, about any other things. So please feel free to type in some questions here, and we'll get to those. There's a couple of questions that I have here as well. When we talk about aligning recognition with organizational values, what are some ways that can easily be done? Because values often are maybe perhaps words on a wall, and they're forgotten easily. How can you align recognition to those values? JD, we'll start with you in your experience.
How do you align recognition with the values?
Yeah.
I think culture is only a culture if you can walk in and you can feel it. So I would say not just talking the talk, not just having it on a wall, but living it. And making it a priority. So I would say even put it in your calendar. That's what I do with to-dos. Recognize one person today, because that will actually show the team that you mean it. You're not just saying it.
Yeah, I love that. And that goes along with what you said earlier about how you need to have buy-in from the top. And as a leader, if you're a leader there, you need to make sure that you're recognizing as well. And I really like that. Thank you. Nick, what would you say to that? How can you help better align recognition with organizational values to drive that alignment?
Yeah, what I would say and what we recommend our clients do is when you have these recognition programs, kind of within that form that they fill out, they can choose what value they're recognizing for. So maybe that's 4 or 5 different company values that your company's trying to push. You can have those listed out, and when employees submit a recognition, they choose one of those, and then you can then pull reports and see which values are being most recognized, which values are most valued by your team members. And then you can highlight certain individuals that kind of often demonstrate those values.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a really powerful way to just highlight those values. Say, this person was recognized for this, and I'll see how that's been demonstrated. It's really great. So thank you both, JD and Nick, for your expertise here. I want to give you both a chance to have any final words about recognition, about recognition in healthcare specifically. And JD, is there any final words you want to give to our viewers of anything you might say?
Yeah, first off, I'm very passionate about recognition and helping people feel seen and needed because I've experienced it myself and the benefits of it. So I'm sure Bronson can share with you my contact info. If you guys have any further questions, I'm happy to answer them and happy to help however I can. I just want to, thank you guys for being here. And it shows that you're either invested in the power of recognition or you are open to the idea of recognition. And I would encourage you that as you apply the things, you're going to see the benefits of it. There's great simplicity in recognition, yet powerful. And I think helping others recognize, again, the dollar amount behind that is very effective. But most importantly, the intrinsic importance that people need to know that they are good, that they are awesome, and they're doing good work. When they're not, you can let them know, but at their core, they're good people. I firmly believe that, and helping them see that will create such a powerful culture and workplace, not only for you, but for the world.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. Nick, is there any other final words you'd like to say as well to our viewers?
Yeah, just real quick, there was a great question on how do we get CFO buy-in earlier and or leadership buy-in to recognition programs. Well, I'll just share is I worked with a large healthcare client who their biggest piece of feedback in their engagement surveys was a need for more recognition. So they went and implemented a robust, holistic recognition strategy, and after a year saw a 5% decrease in voluntary turnover. And now voluntary turnover, of course, is a multivariate equation, but as they analyzed the data, they felt that recognition had a large part to play in that. So that's what I would say, right, is that recognition programs and recognition strategy is no longer a nice to have. It's a need to have, and I think that's a selling point.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you both so much for your expertise. Thank you, JD. Thank you, Nick. Really appreciate your time, and thank you all for viewing this webinar, and we'll toss it back to Rashonda to get that SHRM certification credit for you.